Good morning, students. Today's topics are the continuation of chapter number 9, the making of national movement from history. And today I will discuss with you three topics, in which number one is the growth of mass nationalism and the advent of Mahatma Gandhi, and topic number three is the Rowlatt Satyagraha. All right. So, students, as I told you in my previous explanation about the revolutionary violence which was started by the Indian people to overthrow the British rule from all over the India, because due to the oppressive and very dominating methods of rule over India were responsible for the creation of a lot of problem and related to rights of the common people of India. That's why now everybody wanted to change the rule of India and also wanted to the overthrow of British rule from all over the India, in which the growth of mass nationalism start in all over the country. And students, the meaning of revolutionary violence is the use of violence to make a sudden or radical change within a country or society. All right. So, students, as I told you above, after the mass movement of the common people against the British rule, the growth of mass nationalism also started in all over the country. And after the 1919, whatever struggle started by the common people changed into the mass movement against the British rule. And this mass nationalist struggle started by the peasants, tribal, student, women, and in large numbers of factory owners as well, as because they were all dominated and tortured by the British rule and their policy. Okay. So, students, finally, all these groups of the common people were started to support the Congress in the 1920s. So, students, stories started to change from here. During the time of First World War, whatever the economic and political situation of India over that time started to change, because due to the rise in the defense expenditure of government of India, the government of India, which was British rule, increased taxes on individual incomes and business profits, and also increased military expenditure and the demands for supplies, which led to a sharp rise in prices and responsible for created great difficulties in front of common people. And on the other hand, many business industrialist group were very happy due to the demand, because during the time of First World War, Britain was busy in the war. That's why British industry were unable to produce a kind of products whatever required by the military or and also fighters for the First World War. So, students, now all these needs and requirement of British Army completed by the Indian industry. And the war created a demand for industrial goods like jute, bags, cloth, rail materials, and also decline of imports from other countries into India. All right. It means due to the great demand of many products related to the war and other industrial goods started to produce in India by the big industrialists of India. And in this result, whatever things were imported from other parts of the world into India to complete the needs and requirement now that were all stopped to coming in India. Understood? So, my dear students, in this way, our Indian industries expanded during the war and many big Indian business groups began to demand a greater opportunity for the development of their industries. Okay? And on the other hand, the war also lead the British to expand their army because during the time of World War, Britishers had required a number of army to fight against the opposition. That's why Indian villages were pressurized to supply soldiers for an unknown cause. Students, here a word is given that villages were pressurized to supply soldiers for an alien cause. It means the Indian villages were pressurized by the British officer which were posted in India during the time of First World War to supply soldiers for an unknown reason, for an unknown cause, because innocent villagers of India were unknown about the First World War and the reasons in which the number of villagers required by the Britishers. So students, in this way, a large number of soldiers from India were sent to serve abroad or to fight against the opposition party of Britain. All right. And student, after the war, many returned to the country in India, and during the time of war, the Indian soldiers learned the way in which Britishers were exploiting the peoples of Asia and Africa, and with a desire to oppose colonial rule in India. It means whatever Indian soldiers saw and heard about the British policy, that's why they were also opposed the colonial rule in India. So students, finally in 1917, there was a revolution in Russia, and whatever revolution started in Russia by the peasants and workers as a struggle, and ideas of socialism started to circulate in all over the world, and it is also heard by the Indian people. So our Indian people inspired to the movement of peasants and workers from Russia and started Indian nationalist movement in India against the British. Okay? After that, your next topic is the advent of Mahatma Gandhi. So, my dear students, at the age of 46, Mahatma Gandhi arrived in India in 1915 from South Africa. And when he was living in South Africa, he was also facing the racism or the difference between the black and white in African continent by the British people. That's why he were also against the policy of British rule and the idea of racism or difference between the black and whites. And my dear students, when he was dwelling in South Africa, from that time he was well known and internationally known leaders leaders of the group, and he was also a well known leader. So, students, finally, his South African campaign or movement had brought him in contact with various types of Indians who were belong to the different castes like Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, Christian, and Gujaratis, also Tamils and North Indian and upper class merchant, lawyers, and workers. So, when he came in India, finally Mahatma Gandhi started to move from one place to another place in all over the India from his first year, because he wanted to understand the needs and requirement of the common people and situation whatever created by the British rule among the Indian people. All right. So, my dear student, his first of all local movements, which was started by Mahatma Gandhi in Champaran. And after that, Mahatma Gandhi started many movements like Khera and Ahmedabad, where he came into contact with Rajendra Prasad and Vallabhbhai Patel. And finally, Mahatma Gandhi was successful in Ahmedabad to lead a successful mill workers strike in 1918. Okay. So students, now I am going to discuss with you very important movements whatever are organized by the leaders of the India between 1919 and 1922, in which the number one is the Rowlatt Satyagraha. So students, Rowlatt Satyagraha is also very famous in all over the country and in Indian history, because in 1919 Gandhiji called for Satyagraha against the Rowlatt Act that was passed by the British government in all over the India. And according to the Rowlatt Act, whatever fundamental rights having by the Indians during the time of British rule, like freedom of expression and strengthened police power, were limited by the Rowlatt Act rule. So, Mahatma Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah and other leaders of India felt that the government of British India had no right to restrict people's basic freedom and requirement. That's why Jinnah, Gandhiji, and many leaders started to criticize against the devilish, it means against the act, and they called this act as a devilish act and very oppressive kind of act passed by the British on the Indian people. That's why Gandhiji asked the Indian people to observe, and finally 6 April 1990 as a day of non-violent opposition to this act. And Gandhiji wanted to start movement against the Rowlatt Act, but silently without any violence, That's why he requested to people of India for the non-violent opposition to this act. And finally, a day whenever Rowlatt movement started in all over the country, that day of humiliation and prayer and hartal. So finally, Satyagraha Sabha was set up to launch the movement in many part of the country by the great leaders of India. So students, after some time later, due to the oppressive policy of British rule, the Rowlatt Satyagraha turned out to be the first all India struggle or movement for the independence of India against the British government. Alright? And finally, in April 1919, there were a number of demonstration, it means movement against the British rule and British policy and British nature and hartal in the country. And the government of India, which was that time Britishers, used a brutal or very oppressive nature to stop this movement from all over the India. And students, in this reference, a very famous Jallianwala Bagh case, we know very well that, in which General Dyer in Amritsar and the day of Baisakhi opened the fire upon the innocent people who were gathered in Jallianwala Bagh to start the movement and agitation non-violently against the British rule. So students, finally whatever Jallianwala Bagh massacre done by the General Dyer in Amritsar on the day of Baisakhi or 13th April to stop the movement against the Rowlatt Act by the Indians, Rabindranath Tagore expressed the pain and anger of the country, and also he requested to the people of India that was whatever an honor granted by the British Crown for exceptional personal achievement or public services for the Indians to return it back to the British Crown. Alright? So students, whatever request or anger showed by the Rabindranath Tagore against the Britishers, that was also a kind of movement against the Britishers. Alright? So, my dear students, during the movement of Rowlatt Satyagraha, the participant tried to ensure that Hindus and Muslims were united in the fight of India and for its freedom against British rule. And this was also called off by the Mahatma Gandhi, who always saw India as a land of all the people who lived in the country, whether they are Hindu, Muslim, or they were Hindu, Muslim, and also those of others who belong to the other religion. And he knows very well that if Hindus and Muslims support each other in any just cause, then on that condition, people of India can get the independence of India. And also, Mahatma Gandhi wanted to unite Indians who were belonged to different caste and religion like Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh and other religion who were lived that time during the British rule. They wanted to unite only to stop the oppressive policy or the British rule, and also they wanted to overthrow the British rule from all over the India with the help of different people who belong to the different religion group. All right. So, my dear students, today's that's all. And in my next explanation, I will discuss with you Khilafat agitation and the non-cooperation movement, people's initiatives, and the peoples of Mahatma. All right, students. So listen my lecture very carefully, and anywhere if you have any doubt, then consult to me. All right. Thank you and have a nice day.